I think Tom's going to jump on now and he's going
Oh,
to,
okay.
see, and then he's going to tell us.
Originally aired on the Mighty MERP podcast, this conversation between criminal defense attorney Melissa Rosenblum and victims' rights attorney Lindsay Lieberman remains just as urgent and relevant today. In this episode, Lindsay shares her journey as a virtual law firm founder and legal advocate for survivors of sexual violence and cyber abuse.
This podcast is not a source of legal advice. No two legal cases are the same. Contact an attorney if you require legal assistance.
Welcome to the New Jersey Criminal Podcast.
For the type of services that you're specializing in is such a niche,
Okay.
Narrow area. So, how are people finding you, or how are you finding clients from a business perspective?
So you're right. It's very niche. And fortunately, I have a very large network of attorneys and friends who know that I specialize in this work. I've been in this specific niche area for my whole legal career. So far I've been able to build my practice based on mostly referrals alone, through friends and through attorneys and law school associates and colleagues. So it's very niche. You mentioned that you represent victims and also defendants in the restraining order cases. So I'm only doing victims' rights work, but it's important to note that sometimes the victim is the person who winds up with an order of protection against them, because the defendant or the abuser will get an order of protection against the victim as part of their campaign of abuse. And so I do also represent defendants in family court cases if the facts are such that it's clear that the victim has the restraining order against them.
Right. Is it ever clear? I think that, these are such complicated cases. Yes, restraining orders are supposed to be for protection. And unfortunately, people use them as swords. They try to use them for a benefit in the custody case or the divorce proceedings. And, sometimes it's really difficult to parse out who is the victim and who is the abuser. It's not always so clear.
So one of the perks of having my own firm is I feel so blessed to be able to choose which cases I take. And so I try to really be clear about the clients that I work with to make sure that it is, for me, for my own benefit, that I am representing somebody who I believe, deserves my representation and is the person in need in that situation, whether it's domestic violence or some sort of cyber privacy violation. But I hear you generally. I think especially in more marital context, like divorce, it's very tricky and can be very complicated. But so far I haven't felt that way in my specific cases.
So do you have an extensive intake interview with any potential new clients?
Yes. So I will give anybody who reaches out a free consultation.
Mm-hmm.
I do this because I've had clients who have hired me specifically because they said I talked to other firms, they all wanted me to pay for the consultation, and I'm not willing to do that. I think that's one of the benefits of working with someone like me, who I'm just running a small solo firm. So I can give that kind of attention to each client and potential client. So I'll speak with the potential client for about an hour, get a sense of what's going on. And in that time period, I get a good sense of whether I can help them. And if not, I'll of course refer them out to other firms or organizations that might be able to help them.
And so what courts do you end up working in with clients? You mentioned family.
Yeah, so family court. And again, I'm in New York, New Jersey, and Rhode Island. Luckily, most courts are still virtual. But in addition to family court, I'll do civil litigation in any of the courts in the 3 states. I'll do criminal case advocacy. So let's say a person comes to my firm and they've been the victim of a sex crime or a cyber sex crime, and they want help or assistance navigating the criminal justice system. I'll come on and support them through that process, help them speak with police officers and help them organize their evidence to give to the police and sort of, advocate for them during that otherwise kind of intimidating process. I also represent college students in Title IX proceedings. And in addition, like I mentioned earlier, maybe we could talk about it later, I'm trying to do a lot of prevention work, trying to kind of get ahead of some of these issues. Actually, since I had my babies, I was inspired to
I'm
see what I
sorry,
could
Lindsay,
do.
you just timed out on my side. So tell
No
me more
problem.
about the prevention work because I'm really interested in that. And I assume that it's on college campuses that you're speaking.
Yes, so I'll speak on college campuses. I speak to Greek organizations, but also law enforcement agencies and parenting groups, and basically trying to get the word out, trying to get the message out about how to keep our community safe in order to avoid some of these horrible things that I see happen. And I got into this prevention work when I started having my babies. I've got 2 daughters, ages 20 months and 4 years old. And, having these little babies just kind of got me thinking about how do I make the world safer for them? How do I make their communities safer? And how do I help kind of put an end to all of this horror before it happens? So now I feel good about where I am right now, trying to do as much prevention and education as possible, and also being available for people if, unfortunately, when those bad things happen, they still happen, and I can help them after the fact.
So you mentioned that you talk to all these different groups. Do you think there's a specific either age group or group of people that the prevention and having the conversation is a better conversation or a more appropriate conversation? Because, you talk about, you said you spoke at a parenting groups. I'm sure what you're sharing at that level is different than what you're sharing to a fraternity that you're having a conversation with. So if you could pick like the ideal, group that you would like to, focus on for the prevention aspect.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because my feelings are that the earlier we start having these conversations, the better. And unfortunately, while it's super helpful to go into colleges and fraternities and have these discussions, for many people, it's the first time they're hearing this and they're getting like a sense of sexual misconduct and consent and boundaries. And it's got to start so much earlier and so much younger. So I love to talk to parent groups about how they can encourage their little ones, toddlers, elementary school age students, to be safe online, what to look out for on the internet, how to make good decisions about what kind of activities they're doing online or who they're interacting with. And then as they get older, talking about consent and sexual misconduct, because, it can't be something that you're learning for the first time when you're already at college. It helps to have those conversations then, but hopefully, the education really needs to start earlier. And there's obstacles with getting it in to curriculum earlier because a lot of parents object to talking about sex. And so
as
it's
you're
tricky.
saying this, I'm thinking, I'm not sure how you're going to get this into any school systems or school districts, even though even though I agree with you and the whole consent and autonomy and those conversations are real conversations, um, I'd love to hear how you teach about internet and social media. I mean, my kids at this point are 19, 21, 21, and 23. They got, they all received phones at 13. Really, when they were bar and bat mitzvahed in our house, we thought that was the appropriate time. They were late compared to a lot of their friends. Um, I would love to hear from your perspective how you teach it, and I'm going to tell you that how we taught it to our kids about texting and social media. And it didn't always work, but we did have some main general lessons. But I would rather hear like how you talk to kids about, or parents about teaching their kids about, um, I mean, you're dealing with social media, you're talking about uh, kids are experimenting in middle school with sexting already.
Oh yeah.
And then you have to worry about them also being a victim of predators online. So there's the protecting them as well as protecting them from predators, but also protecting them from their lack of knowledge and understanding of what's appropriate and inappropriate. So how do you teach that?
Right. And before I go into that answer, I also want to just circle back on what you said earlier, that it would be very hard to get this into the school districts. So what winds up happening is, because the school districts aren't willing to educate on these crucial topics, our kids are getting their education from pornography and from each other. And so, they're learning the stuff. They're engaging with this stuff despite our best efforts to try to, keep them from seeing it. So wouldn't it be so much better if we could go in and talk about it with them in like a healthy way, instead of avoiding it, hoping that they're not going to like see it and engage in it, but they do. And
Right. I mean,
then,
if they have access to a phone, a smartphone or a computer, they can YouTube or Google or really, every thought that comes into their head, um, whether it's appropriate or not. And they don't even know sometimes whether it's appropriate or not. They're curious. They literally can type it and search it at that point.
I did not hear that last thing you said. I'm
I
sorry.
said that when kids have access to smartphones and computers, one or the other, they can Google anything, any of their thoughts. Sometimes it's just curiosity. Sometimes they don't know if it's appropriate or not, but it's there either on YouTube or, Google. It's just so accessible in a way that it wasn't when we were younger. And, I think that people don't realize how detrimental having kids in elementary school have these devices that have access to these,
Right.
information that they're not ready to process yet. And
Yes.
I'm just
So
saying, I
there,
know my 19-year-old was made fun of in elementary school because he didn't have a smartphone. And that was 10 years ago. So I can only imagine today what it's like.
well, good for you for holding out and not giving him the phone.
It was hard.
I'm sure. I'm sure. But there is a lot that parents can do, having these conversations early and often, um, about smart tech and being smart online, monitoring what their kids are looking at and doing, putting parental controls on their devices. Um, I think a really important uh, aspect of all of this is to make sure there's like an open back and forth dialogue with our kids, so that they don't feel like if they see something online that's scary and they think, oh, I'm not going to tell my parents because I don't want to get in trouble. I think it's really important that they know that we should be the first people they go to if they see something scary, and that they'll never be in trouble, because obviously, then we can help them process whatever it is that they saw or did, and help solve the problem before it becomes bigger. And this particularly comes up a lot with sextortion cases, which is one of the areas of cyber sexual abuse that I handle. And it's when somebody on the internet pretends to be somebody else and is talking to somebody online, usually a vulnerable person, like a young person. They pretend to be, let's say, like a sexy woman who wants to have like video sex with the child that they're talking to on the other end, and the child thinks it's real, and they start taking off their clothes or sending videos. And as soon as they provide that intimate, personal, or naked content, the wrongdoer on the other side of the internet says, now I have this content. I'm going to send it to your parents. I'm going to send it to your principal, your teachers, unless you give me more, unless you continue masturbating for me, unless you get money out of your parents, from your parents' account, whatever it is. And they basically wind up stuck in this really frightening cycle of being extorted on the internet. And so in those cases, and it's so common, but it's so important that our kids know that they can come to us, that they won't be in trouble, that we will help them. And then we can, put an end to it before it gets really bad.
So I'm sure for many kids, if they're in that situation, the fear of telling their parents is worse than what probably would happen. But, and there's shame to it too, So
Exactly. And it's so devastating because so often these young kids wind up taking like great lengths to end their pain and shame. And so there's been a handful of cases where young people have been extorted or sextorted and then sadly take their own lives. So it's so crucial that we are educating the kids about this and the parents and really encouraging these safe conversations.
Right. And so I know you indicated a few of the things that you say to parents. Make sure you put parental controls on or you check the phone. Do you have any specific do's or don'ts? Don't use this social media device. Don't allow a child under this age to have a phone. Do you think there's, sort of a set of easy pointers or guidelines for parents?
I don't think anything is easy or like straightforward because I actually avoid saying don't use this, don't do this, because you can't guarantee that your kids are going to listen to you. They're going to do it behind your back if you say don't do this. So my approach is to do everything more in like the affirmative, like creating healthy habits instead of telling your kids what not to do. Because as soon as we start telling them what not to do, they're going to go and do those exact things.
Right.
So so some of those like healthy affirmative ways of handling tech in the house is to have like boundaries around when we can use our phones and our computers, and maybe having everybody charge their devices overnight so nobody has their devices in their bedrooms, so that your kids aren't by themselves on their devices up to who knows what. And I also encourage parents to abide by the same rules and guidelines that they're trying to have their kids do. So the parents too will put their phones and their iPads in this like centralized location in the living room. So they also are getting a break from screen time. It just kind of leads to healthier families and more conversation and screen-free time. Oh, but I wanted to hear about so how did you educate your kids?
So I think when your parent is a criminal attorney, whether they're a prosecutor or a defense attorney, they do hear lots of like sort of either don'ts or you need to know this is illegal. So when they started with the social media and the being able to text, the first and I think biggest piece of advice that I gave them that I can still say to them now as adults and they laugh at it, which is don't send any messages or Google anything that you would be embarrassed for your mom, dad, or grandparents to see. If you are sending a message that if I looked at, you would be embarrassed or, ashamed, don't do it. Like, that's the litmus test,
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and I think it did resonate with them of understanding and not disappointing me or, not that embarrassing you. Like, if it's going to embarrass you, if I read it, you probably should not have sent it.
Right. And that's a great pointer. And I would say that as well. Because that's really teaching them that nothing online is private.
Right.
You can think you're having a private conversation with somebody. You can think you're sending a picture to somebody that would never share it with anybody. But as soon as anything is online, it could be uncovered.
Right.
So I totally agree with that.
So that was one thing. I will say I have boys. My boys are going to love this. So I have 4 kids. I'm not going to say who. So 3 of them are boys. And, when they're hitting that teenage years of puberty, it's not like nobody's getting Playboy magazine delivered to their homes anymore to look at pictures. So I did understand that there was a possibility that they would potentially type nude pictures or naked pictures, because I was thinking my kids would still want to be appropriate. They might write naked pictures of, 14-year-olds because they were 14. So I had the conversation of, you can't do it. It's child pornography. It's illegal. And even though it is age appropriate for you to be curious of seeing someone your own age, you can't do it on the computer. It's illegal. And so those are the conversations. But I am going to tell you, Lindsay, that those type of conversations I continue to have, and it changes. Like when they had driver's license, and I know it's a weird comparison, but I'd have a case where a young client would drink and drive, and there'd be an accident or an injury, or they left the scene, and I'd have to come home and say, have those same type of don't do these things. When I had a client, in a serious leaving the scene of an accident case, and go home and say, if you're in an accident, what do you do? And sometimes they wouldn't have the answer. They'd look at me and I'd be like, you stop and you call the police, and it's the same idea of, you don't always know until you need to know. So,
but that's so great that you asked them, if you're in an accident, what do you do? Even if they didn't have the answer and it was a teaching moment. That's how I approach this work as well. It's teaching our kids to have analytical minds, to ask questions, and instead of giving instructions, see what they know and then complement the knowledge that they have or correct it. And sort of asking those questions can really help them learn what they have to learn in these serious situations.
Right. And I mean, I will tell you that they know when they don't know the answer and they're out, if it's involving police, or if, I had one of my kids was at a friend's house and the friend drank too much and there were no parents around. They knew to call me, and I went over there. They know to call me, and they know. And this is the benefit of having an attorney as a mom, and a criminal attorney, is that they don't ever have to say, I need to call my lawyer. They just say, I need to call my mom.
Right. They're so lucky to have you.
And I would say to them, don't call your dad. Your dad loves you, but he's an art teacher. He cannot help you in any of these situations.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So, but, so it's very interesting though, because, we talked about the school situation of schools don't want these things taught there. And yet the kids have access to their phone and technology in the schools, which would be, and I've had kids arrested in school for researching or looking up or typing inappropriate things. So it really is the best place for it to be taught.
Right. Or one of the many places it needs to be taught. It should be talked about at home. It should be taught at school. I mean, it's just a huge part of our lives. To just ignore it and avoid it, hoping that doesn't cause problems is just silly and stupid. I also wanted to comment on something you mentioned earlier about when your son, you kind of had to give him instructions on what to Google when he was looking for porn, which is a totally natural, normal thing for him to do. But another important thing for people or parents to know and to talk about with their kids is not just looking at naked depictions of children being illegal or having that content is illegal, but also capturing the content. And so just even taking a picture of yourself, if you are a minor, even if it's for your own use, it's the creation of child sex abuse material, and it's a crime. And so that's another area where things get really tricky, because if a child takes a picture and has produced this child sex abuse material, and let's say the picture gets out and it's being passed around school, this child goes for help. She goes to the school, or she goes to her parents or the police, and they want to help her, but they don't know how. And ultimately they say, well, what you've done is a crime. You created the picture. So even though it's being passed around your school, we can't really do much for that unless we also, bring charges against you. So let's just push this under the rug and pretend it didn't happen.
So
and so often.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, so you were going to say, so often you don't think it gets dealt with because of that?
Oh, it doesn't get dealt with. The schools don't know how to handle it, because let's say it's, the girl took the picture and she sent it to the boy, and the boy's sending it around to his friends. Technically, what the boy has done is illegal because he's committed revenge
distributing
porn.
Yeah,
exactly.
Even if it's not revenge porn, even if it's just even if it's just stupid sharing, not in a malicious way, it's a distribution of child pornography.
Exactly. So it's criminal because it's child pornography, and it's criminal because it's the distribution of somebody else's intimate content without their consent. But if the girl goes for help, the police will ultimately often say, well, if we take action against him, we also have to take action against you. And so everybody just goes their separate ways, and it's kept pretty hush hush. And I have a big issue with this because for a lot of girls, this is the first time that they wind up having some sort of privacy violation. And then when they go to get help, they're told that they've done something wrong. It's victim blaming and victim shaming, and kind of teaches them that they're responsible when bad things happen to them. And sadly, they wind up with this message that they shouldn't go for help when things happen.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I handled a lot of these cases, and there's been a number of them, at least in the counties that I've worked in, which is all of South Jersey. And many of the cases, and they're cases exactly the way you describe them. Usually it's a young girl, high school student, who's sharing I'll say, explicit picture. Doesn't have to be fully naked, but it's, it's a part of her body or parts of her body. She's sending it and sharing it to her boyfriend. And then either they break up and he's sending it sometimes for malicious purposes, sometimes not. And I've had cases where the girl has done this several times. And in these cases, they never charge the girl down here. They never charge the girl, even though the girl initially sends it. And as you said, it's sending it from the girl, whoever takes, we don't even need to say gender. It doesn't matter if it's a girl or a boy. The person who takes the picture and has it on their phone, if you're under 18, that is possessing child pornography. If you share it, that's a distribution. And I have seen many cases where it's only the people who receive it and then continue to share it that have been charged. And usually they don't charge that individual who initiated it. And so I definitely understand the concern from the, idea of victim blaming, because we don't, I think it is detrimental, and especially because it is women, young women, that it is their first, usually it's somebody they trust that they're sharing the picture with. but yet at the same time, it's the idea that um, anyone who receives it is getting charged as well, whether they requested it, whether they intended to get it. So I've had clients that are like, I don't know, I just ended up on this chain and, I received all these pictures. So it is a weird situation. The law in New Jersey, when they're juveniles though that are receiving it, um, is the idea that they're receiving diversions with courses on sexting and more of an educational background than keeping juveniles in the criminal justice system. The only times where they're really pursuing it, at least I'm in Atlantic, Cape May, Cumberland, and Ocean mostly. And the only juvenile matters that I see that they're really pursuing it is when it's really done with the malice, where the person is doing it because they're breaking up or they're angry or they're fighting. And in those cases, the courts really are not handling it in a let's just take a class and a diversionary. I think
That's
there's
great.
a clear difference.
Yeah, I mean, you've got the intent there, and that's really important. And I'm so glad to hear that these cases are being brought in your counties and that they're giving these kids exactly what I'm suggesting they should all have in the first place, right? That education. And so I'm so glad to hear that. And
it is
I think
interesting wherever you are in the state, there is a difference between the counties. So I really don't handle cases, above Ocean County. So I will say whatever people consider central and North Jersey, I wouldn't know how they're being handled in that area.
Right. I think, just for pictures and for privacy, a big part of this is just a person's autonomy and rights to their body, of course. And so it's a lesson in, if somebody, never mind children, if an adult takes a picture, captures themselves in a certain way and wants to share it with one person or two people, there's contextual consent. We should be allowed to share something personal and private with another person with the understanding that the other person is going to keep it private and between the two of us. We do this all the time when we give store owners our credit card information or we give doctors our medical information, but when it comes to photos and videos, even though the laws are on the books, finally, it took a long time, it's still, I think people don't look at it in the way that maybe they should be, because there's a lot of questions like, well, why did you take the picture in the first place? Why did you send the picture? Not for kids, because, child pornography is a different story. But even, just working with adults, there's still a lot of that victim blaming and shaming. And so I'm working towards changing that.
No, I agree with you on that. And it's, I think people reaction is right. Well, you sent it. If you give something to the person, isn't it theirs? And I think that the idea of it was different really when it was pictures, right? Or a note. It just, with social media, it just seemed to change the landscape of it. So,
Right.
In addition to education and victim advocacy, is there anything else you're doing to try to change really the understanding of, the laws and the behavior? I would say those two.
Yeah. So I'm bringing lawsuits in court. I just recently brought a suit in the Northern District of New York for a revenge porn case. So, the laws are slowly developing. And so these cases need to be brought so that, there's deterrence and justice. So I'm also doing trainings with law enforcement so that I can help teach officers and detectives how to speak with victims of these kinds of sexual privacy violations. And I'm also rolling out a new program where I'm going into personal injury law firms and like medical malpractice law firms and teaching their staff and their attorneys on how to be more victim, like trauma informed, how
Mm-hmm.
to talk to their potential clients and their clients in a way that doesn't re-traumatize them. It's all I've done my whole career is to work with victims or survivors of these kinds of violations. But I think so often people who work in regular personal injury firms or med mal, they don't realize or know necessarily how their behavior and their communication can impact their client or potential client in a negative way. And so I'm finding that, I mean, trauma informed care is so crucial all over the place. But even for a law firm, it's actually in their like financial interest to get
Mm-hmm.
trained on trauma sensitive communications. Um, Even if, a potential client calls their firm and it's not the case for them, but that potential client could have a bunch of friends with great cases. And if they want those referrals, they need to treat that potential client with the utmost respect and dignity. And after somebody's been the victim of a crime or an accident, like they're really vulnerable and they need all that care and compassion. And so I'm finding that firms are interested in learning more about this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's another type of training that I'm rolling out and doing.
What was your undergraduate degree? Do you mind me asking?
Political science.
It seems like everyone who went to law school, most of us were political science. And so the trauma training that you had it through while you were a district attorney and since then?
Oh yeah, it's been ongoing. I mean, just working with victims, which I'm sure you are having the same experience as you work with victims as well, or even defendants. Even a defendant is someone who's been traumatized and
Oh, yeah.
needs that compassion and care. Um, and it's not taught in law school. It's not common knowledge, but it's really important. It helps get better outcomes in cases. It helps develop better relationships with your clients. So it's 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 pretty important.
Correct. And I always say it really, even if potential clients that you can't help, just, and it's funny, I don't call it, trauma informed care. I talk about the kindness of my office and the listening to our clients. Even, I get people calling my office and asking me to handle every type of case from landlord tenant to civil, you know, um, as well as suing civilly for the type of cases that you're handling that I don't. I don't handle any civil cases. And, a lot of our day, my staff contacts me all the time. Do you have a referral? Do you have someone who can help? And just spending those 5 minutes or 10 minutes with individuals, even though we know we cannot help them from what we do here, um, so often at the end of the conversation, I say, like, I can't help you. Call this person. You can let them know you talked to me. I'll say it doesn't get you anything other than, that we spoke and I made the referral. And they're so appreciative just to have someone listen to them for a few minutes and take the time to refer them to someone who can help them. Just, as simple as I keep saying, like, kindness. You don't know what other people are going through. Um, and my clients and their families are tough sometimes. And, my staff is young. They're 2 years, a year out of college. And I say, just listen, and tell them we'll make the referral, or if it's one of our clients, we'll make an appointment to talk to me or the other attorney. And there are times they need to hang up. They need to like walk away and take a breath but that time, genuine time with people, of not rushing them off the phone and genuine listening, it builds goodwill for your law firm, even if they don't need us at that moment. Maybe they'll need us in the future, or maybe in a situation they're going to meet someone else and they're going to say, who can help you on this? So I think what you're talking about, when I hear it, the trauma informed care, I hear it, but I also think of like the customer service, the personalized care, the really listening to why an individual is calling a law firm, because if someone's calling a law firm, they feel they need help that a layperson can't give them.
Exactly. So there's been some sort of trauma, otherwise they wouldn't need legal help. And, I hear you on some of your clients and their family members being difficult, because oftentimes when there's been a trauma, everybody's got big emotions and it's a very scary, vulnerable time. So client management is definitely something that I've been working on, and something that it sounds like your staff members are getting really good training in so early in their career. But it's crucial to have when you're operating a law firm.
Yes. So, any last things that you want to share? I will say to you, your kids are at a fun age. Like, I know they're little, and you probably with work and little kids, it seems like a lot, but at the same time, like, I don't know. I mean, I loved every age that my kids were, but at that age when they were toddlers and in that age group, everything was so easy. Even their worst days can be fixed with hugs and kisses and ice cream.
It's true. They're so yummy. They're so cute. Um, Everybody had a sick day today, so they're actually here. I hear them like screaming in the other room. But it's just so like
I
there's
can't
nothing
hear
better.
them, if you want you to know. Yeah, I can't hear
I'm
them,
glad.
but yeah,
I'm glad.
but
But
they
yeah,
are at a fun age.
yes. There's nothing better that I've done in my life than have these kids, and they're just everything to me. And they inspired me to start my own firm and to continue doing the work that I'm doing. So they're my inspiration, and I hope to be a good role model for them. And I'm so impressed that you have 4 kids, and it makes me kind of want to have another or two. It's a lot.
I don't want to get in trouble for that in the future, but yeah. So we went from 1 to 3. So when people say to me, "Oh my goodness, you had a 4th," and I jokingly was like, "We were already in a zone defense right away." But I loved having babies. I probably would have had, if we could afford 10 more. I really loved having kids, but um, you know, I was fortunate that I was able to teach when my kids were little at Rowan University. So, not for the first 3, but when the 4th one was born, I was home for a few years just teaching at Rowan University. And then I went back full time when my youngest went to kindergarten. So I feel like I've had the best of all the worlds, full time working, part time working, home with them, back to being a full time attorney. So.
That's so great. And I think it's so important for other women to know that that's possible, that you can take that time off and you can still come back and you can do amazing things in your legal career, and that it doesn't have to be the choice. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I'm going to, stay at home or continue being a lawyer.
No, I just gave a speech at a women's networking event, and I really talked about the fact that there were times that my career was moving very fast, and then times where I had to hit the brakes and really focused on being a mom and focused on my kids. And the truth is that all the success that I've had really professionally, if I was going to look at the timeline, they all happened after I came back to work when my kids were a little bit older. And so I tell people, you don't have to do it by your 30 or 40 years old. I went back to work. I think I was 39 turning 40. I'm now 52. So all my successes really have been in the last 13 years or so. So
I love that. You're inspiring me because I'm 39 turning 40. So that's wonderful to think, it can only go up, and that's wonderful.
That's great. Thanks, Lindsay. Thanks so much for reaching out and for talking. And just so you know, and everyone who's listening knows, if you're interested in knowing more about Lindsay Lieberman, about her law firm, or how she can be an advocate for you or any individuals, and I'm going to say women that you might know. It'll all be on the Mighty MERP website, and feel free to take a look.
Ooh, can I say one more thing?
You can.
Men also need my help because men also wind up being victims of sexual privacy violations. So yes, most of my clients are women, but I don't want to, close the door to any men or boys or anyone who identifies otherwise.
Thank you. I should do better. I should know better and do better.
No, what do you mean?
No, but yes, I mean, I'm just saying that, like, I think that, we fall into these stereotypes, but I too have had victims that are men as well. But
yeah, no, the stereotypes exist for a reason. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Most of my clients are women, 100%. So don't worry.
That's okay. Again, it was great talking to you, and thanks again, and we'll talk soon. Okay, Lindsay?
Thanks so much, Melissa, for having me. Happy Hanukkah.
Happy Hanukkah to you too.
If you're a lawyer or a law firm, you're interested in podcasting a little bit or a lot, go to legalpodcasting.com or simply email clerk@legalpodcasting.com. Or if you're on njcriminalpodcast.com, you can fill out any of our contact forms or formats and reach out to us here. We'd love to help you get started.